So I've now seen Steven Spielberg's Ready Player One, the adaptation of Ernest Cline's hit novel. Now, let me get this out of the way real quick. I am not a fan of this book, and I read this book when it first came out. I used to live in Texas, so I knew about Ernest Cline and his Buckaroo Banzai 2 script. He was a pretty popular guy in Austin. He drives around in the Batmobile and the DeLorean. I think he has a DeLorean. I'm not sure if he actually has the Batmobile from the 60s Batman. A lot of people have a version of that car. The reason I was never a fan of the book, and this isn't an attack on anyone who likes the book because it's fine if you do, I just never found it that literary. I never thought the prose were that impressive and that it was a very intellectually stimulating experience as a read. For me, it just came off like a second-tier snow crash. And it relied far too much on references and nostalgia, and I found it to be indulgent and wordy for the sake of it, and I don't know, I just never really got into it. But I'm not knocking the book. Once again, if you like it, that's fine, just not my kind of book. However, I did think it could make a good movie. There was a lot of potential there for a screenplay because you could really condense this down into something that worked visually. So what did I think about this movie? Well, I'll get this out of the way. I like this movie. I don't love this movie. I don't think it's great. It's not one of Steven Spielberg's best films, and I'm a fan of Spielberg, and I don't think it's one of the best films I've seen in the last few years. But did I have a fun time? Did I enjoy the movie? Did I think it was entertaining and visually stimulating? Did I like the message of the movie? Yes, I thought it was a very good movie. I thought that it worked for the most part. I really liked the first act of this movie. If you don't know the premise, it follows Wade Watts, who lives in a trailer park, the Stacks, where all these trailers are on top of each other. He spends his free time in the Oasis, a VR game that's been created by James Halliday, and almost everyone lives in this game now. Nobody really lives in reality anymore. It's like a dystopian future. Now, the dystopian future, the world outside of the Oasis, is hardly fleshed out, and we don't really know how anything happened, but the Oasis itself is very fleshed out. And this is what makes the first act so entertaining. As soon as he goes into it, there's an awesome car chase sequence, tons of great special effects, the pacing, the energy of it, the camera work and the editing and all of that, the choreography, the pacing. It's very exciting. The first 20 minutes, half hour is very exciting. Some truly classic, great Spielberg world building here with the Oasis. Unfortunately, it's not reflected in the real world setting, and that does affect the movie's emotional stakes. You like Wade's avatar, Parzival, you like Artemis, you like his friends and all that, but you never really feel like they're in that much danger in the real world. Even though they are, it's just so shortchanged compared to the Oasis. Now, after the first half hour or so, which I thought the film was pretty much perfect at that point, I thought they did a great job with the setup. I did think it started to get sloppy with its logic, and it became very contrived. Despite some terrific special effects, once again, great cinematography, although, of course, a master's making this movie and one of the great living cinematographers shot it. Really good editing, really well-cut movie. My thing when I bring up the contrived script, and this is not going into spoiler territory in a totally way, but in particular, everybody lives close together. Everything is located very near to each other. You start to find out that every character is legitimately just like right beside each other, near the bad guy. I mean, there's no distance between anything, and I thought that was just ridiculous and lazy. I know everyone's been moving to the city Columbus, Ohio, because I don't know why in particular. I guess maybe that's because Halliday, but at the same time, like, really? You're gonna write it this way where everybody's just a few blocks from each other? It was convenient to say the least, really. I mean, it gets more ridiculous as the movie goes on, as characters start to meet each other in the real world, and you're like, oh, come on. My other big issue with the film is these Easter eggs that James Halliday puts in the game, because in the movie, James Halliday has been dead for 5 years, and he set up all these Easter eggs and keys, and if you get them, you get control of the Oasis and his fortune. Now, this is kind of like Willy Wonka in the sense that you get the golden ticket, and then whoever gets out at the end gets to have the chocolate factory. My problem with this is that the Easter eggs and the way to find the keys is so simple, and anyone who's a gamer or who has any basic knowledge of pop culture or could use the internet would figure these things out in 15 minutes. I know they're making this for mainstream audiences, but at the same time, in the world we live in today, the internet, I mean, are you kidding me? This stuff is not hard to do, especially the first one with the race. What Wade does to get the first key is like, nobody tried that in 5 years. Really? Nobody tried that in 5 years. Nobody figured this out. If this was actually realistic or had logic to it, this would have been figured out in 15 minutes. And it does hurt the movie because you can't really go, oh, well, that was clever. I didn't think of that. It's like, oh, well, that's obvious. What the hell? And that just really bothered me because they could have been more clever with it. It didn't hurt the subtext of the movie. It didn't really hurt the energy of the movie, but it made it feel less intelligent than it could be. I mean, this could have been a smarter movie, and I think they could have put a little bit more work into that. There's also a lack of character development. I mean, you just meet these people and you don't really get much backstory on anyone, including the lead character, Wade, and that does affect, once again, the emotional stakes of the movie. It ends up just becoming an action spectacle and less of a character piece, and it doesn't move you like some other great Spielberg films do, like from the 80s. You're just not really that into the characters. They're fine, and the actors are decent. I didn't dislike any of the characters. In fact, I think Artemis is a very good character and should have probably been the lead of the movie. She had way more charisma. I didn't dislike Wade, and I didn't dislike the actor, the Cyclops kid, but he wasn't great or anything like that. He wasn't Marty McFly. It sucks because if this film had just been a little bit more intelligent with how it set things up, the Easter eggs had been better presented or just better written, and the characters had more development, I think this could have been a really, really good movie, like really good. Instead, it's just a very passable, fun experience, and I had a good time in the theater. Even though I think the film's a little too long, I think it should be cut by 15-20 minutes. And I, in particular, wish the bad guy had more to do. I wish that the world of the IOI, the 101 or whatever, I wish that had been fleshed out more. I wish all of that stuff. I like the voiceover, and I like how it informs you of what's going on, but I just wanted a little bit more of that before we jumped into the main story. Now, there's one sequence in this film in particular that really stands out that's in the middle of the movie, and I'll try not to spoil it, but they go into a famous horror movie. And what makes this scene so great isn't that it's just relying on your knowledge of this movie, it's that it's twisting your perceptions of reality and physics with this film, and then it shows you what a great VR experience could actually be in the near future. It's at this moment that Spielberg's brilliance, the high concept of the premise, and everything intertwined and nostalgia comes together into a beautiful whole. This is the best sequence of the movie. Not just because it's the most entertaining and the most clever, but because it sells the premise better than any other moment in the movie. This is what Ready Player One could be. And if they make sequels, this could potentially get expanded into much more interesting places despite the sequence. But great scene, really. You'll know what I'm talking about when you see the movie. I just like the pacing and the tone of this movie. It made me feel good. I really enjoyed watching it. I had a good time in the theater. I like the energy of the movie. I like the enthusiasm behind it. And Spielberg's in his 70s. Like, what the hell? It just felt polished. It just felt really well put together. It felt like they knew that it was a certain kind of quality and they could reach it, and they pulled it off for the most part. Once again, it could be a little tighter, but it's still fine. And I also really like the message of this movie. I do, even though it's really forced and they lay it on thick at the end. It's about how we need to stop just consuming the internet and technology so much and actually go out and experience things in the real world again. I mean, we live our lives on the internet. Even me, I make YouTube videos, but we live our lives now through technology, and they say that that's evolution, that we're just going to the next step. But this movie argues that we're losing the human touch. We're losing that connection, that the only way you're going to feel certain feelings is through reality, and that's fundamentally true as for right now. So the movie says, hey, we can enjoy these things. We can enjoy video games. We can enjoy VR. We can enjoy movies and all this stuff. But at the same time, you need to go out and hang out with people. You need to go outside, and you need to engage. I mean, you've seen this message before in a movie like WALL-E, where people just get fat because they're too lazy and they don't want to do anything and they rely on technology, and the whole world's just trash. But this movie finds a nice balance, saying that you can be a fanboy, you can enjoy these things, but at the same time, take a reality check every once in a while. In particular, the emotional core of the movie comes from James Halliday, played by Mark Rylance, and those are some of the best scenes of the movie. The problem with this is that Spielberg spends so much time in the Oasis and playing with his toys that it almost contradicts the message he's trying to say here. It's like, hey, embrace reality and human beings. But the movie itself embraces the artificial. The movie isn't really about the humanity and the outside world. It's about the Oasis. So at the same time, it's like, well, the things that you clearly like, Steven, are the Oasis, but you're trying to tell us that we need to go back outside, but your characters don't do that, so it doesn't really feel balanced. It's a nice message, but they could have done a better job with it. At the same time, though, I hear a lot of people just saying this movie's crap, and I don't agree with that at all. It is a little bit too much on the screen, especially the last act, the last half hour. It's just visual vomit at a point. But the way they're intercutting between the real world and what's going on in the Oasis is very clever. It helps keep you in the reality of the situation. It helps keep things coherent so you can follow things. And I think it works pretty well. It's a pretty clever gimmick, like The Matrix. And despite the villain being cliche, he's very likable. You know, he's a great actor, and he brings a lot to it. And I just think there's some scenes that are actually really clever. There's one scene where the kids are tricking him, and it's a really well thought out scene. Despite a lot of my criticisms that I think a lot of things could have been done better, and honestly, it needed a few rewrites, and I don't know how they didn't see some of these issues, it's still one of Spielberg's most entertaining movies over the last 10 years. Sure, is there a side of me that wishes this was more satirical, like Starship Troopers? Hell yes! But that's not what it's trying to be. It's trying to be a movie for little kids and teenagers and older people. Anyone could really enjoy this movie if you can get over your cynical side. And yeah, there's some cringy dialogue, like, you know, every fanboy knows a hater that doesn't really come across well, but that's few and far in between. You know, for the most part, it's a pretty decent movie. I like the look of it. I like the music. I like the characters well enough, even though they're not really three-dimensional. They're like 2.5-dimensional, and everything else about it, the pacing and all of that, it just works. And I much prefer this to 1010 or any of the Robert Zemeckis movies like Polar Express, Beowulf. I think it's not as dry as some of the historical biopics that Spielberg's been doing over the last, 20 years. And if they do make sequels, they do have potential to make this much better and flesh this world out more, and we get to know these characters a little bit better. And I'm excited about that. I do want a sequel to Ready Player One. So I know some people aren't happy that I'm not trashing this movie and I'm not just crapping on it like some other people are. And I can understand if you don't like this movie. I'm not trying to say that I'm right. But I really just don't understand that attitude towards it. I think overall it works. It works. It executes what it's trying to do. It does have an emotional core with James Halliday. It does have these nice moments where the characters meet each other in the real world, and it plays with your perceptions of what people look like and what you think about them. And I kind of like that. There's this transhumanist aspect to this movie. So overall, I give Ready Player One a solid 7 out of 10. Nothing more than that, but nothing less. And I would watch it again at home on Blu-ray. So I recommend it. Thanks for watching.